Parshas Ki Sisa, Tafshin Pei Beis. Baruch Hashem, all for good reasons, for simchas and schedule changes. So once again this week we're doing the shir remotely, and Emir Hashem, hopefully next week we plan on being back at our regular location. And the Torah begins this week's parsha by telling us about the Machzis HaShekel. Machzis HaShekel being the half a shekel where everyone had to give exactly the same amount, the half shekel, and it did not matter whether you could afford more or you could afford only less. Everyone had to give the same Machzis HaShekel. So the obvious question is, to begin, is why it was that way. Why did the Torah specifically make a mitzvah with a half a shekel, right? I mean, make it with a whole shekel. Why did the Torah specifically set this up that it should be a machzis hashekel, a half shekel? And the Nesivos Shalom, very interestingly, points out that we need to keep in mind and we need to know that Hashem created the world and continues to actually run the world in a certain type of system, and that is a system of pairs. A system of pairs and a system of things that supplement and complement each other. From the creation at the beginning of time, from the creation of man way back over 5,782 years ago, right? From that time already, Hashem created a man and said, "Lo toiv heyois ha'adam levadai," that it's not good for a person to be alone. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the woman to create a mate for every individual, every animal, everything works in pairs. And that's the way Hashem set up the world. And very much so, we find the same concept, actually, let's say by the limbs of a person, right? A person, most of the limbs that a person has consist in pairs: 2 arms, 2 legs, your ears, your eyes. And we know famously the Chafetz Chaim tells us why we only have one mouth, because it's obviously very, very difficult to control your mouth and all the Chas v'Shalom averos and things that we can transgress on a daily, hourly, minute-by-minute basis, trying to control one mouth, right? So that goes into a whole different category and a whole different thing. But generally, Hashem made everything with pairs, physically. And really that carries over also to the spiritual realm of the world too. It says in Nesivos Shalom that the world of Avodas Hashem comes in with 2 things that work together, and that is really Ahava and Yira. And that's the way the world turns, that's the way the world ticks. It goes along with Ava and Yira. We know the first half of the S.S.S. Hadibros, those that consist of Anochi Hashem Alekecha, Emuna, Kabedes Avicha V'Yasimecha, honoring, respecting your parents, Zochores Yoim HaShabbos L'Kadshoy, keeping the Shabbos. That's mitzvahs like that are the first half, basically, of the S.S.S. Hadibros, and those things are based on Midas Ahava, proactive Midas Ahava. And the second half were the mitzvahs loisase, where thou shalt not do this or that or anything like that. Those are mitzvahs loisase, and those consist more to the concept of Midas Hayira. And a Yid needs to know that a person wants to be a Shalem, and Shlemus, person wants to be complete, have everything, right? So Shleimus and Avodas Hashem for every Jew is putting those two luchos together, the first half and the second half. The mitzvahs aseh, the mitzvahs lois aseh. A person has to put all of those together. We put the luchos together, and a person becomes an Oved Hashem. That's what Oved Hashem is. Someone who does the mitzvahs of Hashem from both sides of this equation, where both sides of the luchos, the Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem, where they work in tandem, they work in pairs. So once again, we see, just like the limbs of a person and the creation of man, creation of animals, so too on a spiritual level, we see that it works in pairs from two contrasting things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that have to work together. Avos Hashem, mitzvos aseh, and Yiras Hashem, mitzvos loy saseh. And again, they work in pairs. And along those lines, we need to know that a person has to be cognizant of the fact that there's a chelik of the Torah, and every person wants to be Mekayim the whole Torah. But a person has to know that there is a chelik of the Torah that a yochid, an individual, cannot do without the koyach of Klal Yisrael. And that's a concept that we really have to familiarize ourselves with, and we have to always be thinking about that if you look at yourself, that you're everything, and you look at yourself only as an individual, you cannot be Mekayim everything that you need to be Mekayim in the Torah. To be Mekayim many parts of the Torah, you need the Koyach Harabim. As we've mentioned over the years, the Noam Elimelech tells us in Parshas Devarim that there is a special world called the world of Kol Yisrael. The entirety, the masses of Klal Yisrael, the Koyach Harabim, Klal Yisrael, there's a special world called Kol Yisrael. And in that special world, there is no chait. There are no iniquities. There is no chait in that world. No averes. Chait exists only among individuals. But Kol Yisrael, Klal Yisrael, is Kodesh Kodashim. It always remains untainted. It always remains whole and complete. And that really is the inyan in our parsha of Machzis HaShekel, where we're bringing each member of Klal Yisrael into this world of connection, where we're telling you very openly and specifically that you as an individual may be fantastic, you may be good, you certainly think you're good, right? And you certainly have many good attributes and you have many good things, but you need to know that you're part of a union. You're part of something, you're part of a whole that needs to connect with other people. You need to connect to this entity known as Klal Yisrael. And if it's a Machzis HaShekel, that message is delivered by every person all the time, each year, that I'm only Machzis. I'm only one part of this whole known as Klal Yisrael. Machzis HaShekel tells us that alone we will not cut it alone. The only way we can make it completely is as a Rabbim. And this idea is really extremely important when we discuss the Mishkan in the Parshias that we're learning now, and the Beis HaMikdash, future generations, Beis HaMikdash that was, and the Hashem, the Beis HaMikdash that will be very, very shortly. We know the Avodah of the Mishkan needed to be dafka with a Machzis HaShekel, because the Beis HaMikdash and the Mishkan brought Klal Yisrael together. So if we're giving toward the Mishkan, we're giving toward the Beis HaMikdash, it's a Machzis HaShekel. It's coming to tell us that to build a Mishkan, to build a house for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to build a Beis HaMikdash, we need to know this idea that we have to come together. Hashem wants to see us all uniting, to become the way we're meant to be, one piece of a part of a whole people. And that's what Hashem wants to see. You're going to build my house, Kaviyachol, says Hashem. You're going to build my house. How? By showing that you want and you need to be united, where you drop your differences and you become part of one whole. And the only way, really, to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and be Mekayim, the ultimate mitzvah of Uvoy Sidba, connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is by coming together as one nation. And Chazal tell us that the way to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is like fire, Eish Eichla. How in the world are we supposed to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Chazal tell us that we should cleave and connect to Talmidei Chachamim. Once again, that you need others. You need others to help you. Others that are the conduit for you to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is what the ultimate mitzvah, Uvay Sidbak. As we've mentioned, all the other mitzvahs could be 613 pathways to get to Uvay Sidbak, to connect, and be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that was really the tachlis of the Beis HaMikdash, to bring everyone closer to Hashem. And in order to do that, you need to be close to Talmidei Chachamim, to people that may be better than you are. And Machzis HaShekel delivers to us that message. The Rambam tells us at the beginning of Hilchos Shkalim, the Rambam says that even an ani, someone who is poor, and he's being supported by tzedakah, an ani would need to sell his clothing or to borrow to be mekayim this mitzvah of machzah shekel. Unbelievable, right? I mean, just think for a second. Why not? We have a klal. We always say, oines rachmana patre. If a person, if a person cannot accomplish something, you don't have the means to accomplish, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu would sort of pardon you and say, you don't have to do this mitzvah, you can't do it. But yet we see by Machzis HaShekel that a poor person would have to sell the meager possessions that they do have, and you have to be, says the Rambam, you have to either borrow money, sell your possessions, but you must be Mekayim, this mitzvah of Machzis HaShekel. Why? Why is it that way? Says in Nesivos Shalom, the answer is that the kesher to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that this brings us, this Machzis HaShekel, that unites us all together, is not just another mitzvah, another way of life. It's a yesod of the Torah. It's a foundation of our belief that achdus amongst Klal Yisrael is a shirish. It's a root. It's something that we need. It's something that we cannot exist without. And we can't miss this lesson. We can't miss this opportunity. Remember, the Churban Habayis came about. The Gemara Masechta Yuma tells us, Chazal tell us, that the Churban Habayis came about because we forgot this lesson. We forgot that every Yid needs another Yid. Every Yid has to love every other Yid. Appreciate someone that's different than you. Appreciate someone who you may feel is not as good as you, although they probably and may very well be. But if you have those feelings, you need to appreciate every person for who they are, what they are, because they can help you. They help you become part of one whole known as Klal Yisrael. And this is really a lesson that we all have to learn, to stop the pettiness. Stop the pettiness and looking and finding the differences between members of Klal Yisrael, factions of Klal Yisrael, people of Klal Yisrael, different types of people that are different, look different, different customs, different places, different cities, different. We have to stop that. We have to understand Machzis HaShekel, the message being delivered, is that as individuals, we're not enough. We need to unite. We need to love every Yid. V'ahavta l'reacha kamoicha. Let's learn this lesson. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu will see that his children are getting together. And they're one. And they're ba'achdus. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, now I'm ready. He will say, now I'm ready to build my house. I'm ready to build my house amongst you. The Bayis Shlishi should come speedily in our days.